You are now tuned in to the Triple Threat Podcast.
Alrighty, welcome back to the Triple Threat Podcast. It's been a while for us, but no fear, no fret. We are back. Ken Triplett along with Jordan Triplett, my partner in crime. We're here to talk NBA. And we're going to talk about probably the most mercurial, the most frustrating, and the most soap opera type team. I don't know how to describe it, but we're going to talk a lot about Philadelphia 76ers basketball, which is our favorite team, and a lot of news obviously comes out of Philadelphia, and, there's a lot going on with the NBA. We'll touch on those subjects, coronavirus, fans in the stands or not, MVP races, things like that. We will hit most of those subjects. But anyway, welcome back, Jordan. How are you?
I'm still reeling from watching this organization unravel before our eyes. But other than that, at least I don't have the coronavirus myself. It's spreading like nobody's business right now, and it's crazy that it's really affecting the league and causing some concerns about playing in front of fans.
Yeah, that's going to be a big issue. I have a feeling that issue is going to get bigger and bigger as each passing day goes along. As we are taping today's show, we understand that the Golden State Warriors are going to be the first NBA team to test the waters, if you will, of not having any fans at their games. And I think it's smart what the NBA is going to do. Maybe the first, I don't know what their schedule is, but maybe the first game or two, just kind of see how that works out, of not having fans in the stands. And then it's going to spread according to, the type of emergency, if you will, in any specific city. They talked about earlier, Jordan, in today's news about moving games to cities that have not been affected yet. Cities like Buffalo or, other cities that are close to NBA towns, like maybe the Raptors would play in Buffalo if because Buffalo has a low affected area, if you will. But right now they're going to go with the Golden State Warriors and test the waters, if you will, of not having any games, which is going to be interesting to just kind of even see that on television.
Yeah, it's crazy. If they move Sixers games, good luck for the rest of the season because they can only win in Philadelphia. So that's one thing to think about with them. But just the magnitude, even LeBron had to back down from what he said earlier in the week, saying he would never play without fans, but now he's considering it. I'm sure he was told the check wouldn't clear if he didn't play. So, it's a tough situation, but it's best for everybody.
Yeah, the NBA's got to make money. These leagues have to continue to make money. I don't know how it's going to work out with fan refunds or anything like that. We'll get to the, I don't know. I don't think we're going to go into the business side of that at all, but I'm just curious to find out what's going to happen in terms of no fans in the stands, how, they're going to continue to make money or lose money. But, hey, they have to do what they have to do. But we're going to move forward and talk about our 76ers a bit. As we started at the top of the show, the soap opera that continues. And basically what dropped today was a podcast done by Jimmy Butler, the former Philadelphia 76er, who is now with the Miami Heat, and J.J. Redick, the also former Philadelphia 76er, now with the New Orleans Pelicans, who basically did about a 10 to 15 minute I don't want to say venting session, but basically just wanting to clear the air about what happened at the end of last year when Jimmy Butler came to the 76ers and why he did not re-sign with the Sixers. And so a lot of things were opened up to, and it was no holds barred about the lack of communication, just a complete dysfunction that's going on in Philadelphia. The main thing that everyone is focusing on right now is what Jimmy Butler said when he first got to Philadelphia the first 2 to 3 weeks. He didn't know who the F was in charge. He didn't know who was in charge, Jordan. What's on?
I don't know what could be happening with this organization. Like, how do you... I understand the whole collaborative front office thing that they were trying at first, but somebody has to take charge and lead the franchise. Nobody's going to get any rings or any championships like they say they want, get any 1 seeds or complete games in the fourth quarter or do anything without somebody stepping up and saying, I'm going to point us in this direction. This is what I need all the rest of you to do. It's so baffling that an entire organization can last like this for so long. And it takes Jimmy Butler. Of course, it has to be Jimmy Butler that ends up saying something about it. And I'm glad he came forward, because hopefully this causes some sort of change in not only the head coaching situation, but also the front office and even ownership, because I've seen fans asking for Harris to sell the team.
Yeah, and I'm glad as well that he was the one who brought this to light, because everyone's been trying to figure out what's been going on in Philadelphia. And I think Jimmy Butler's a straight shooter, no matter what you think of him or his reputation and whether or not you think he's difficult to work with. He has that reputation for sure. But one thing that I gather from him is that he's not a liar, and he's not anyone that is going to stir anything up for no reason. And, I think he said a lot of things that make sense. And, he got there and he said, listen, I'm trying to figure out, with my reputation, not trying to be a hard ass or not trying to be difficult, who's in charge, who I need to talk to, who I need to communicate with, what's going on with the film sessions. And he brought up the infamous film session that was reported last year where he supposedly challenged Brett Brown in terms of his understanding of the offense that was running. And he basically just talked about how, they were in a film session and they're watching film and no one's saying a word. There's no analysis. There's no feedback. There's no question and answer session. They're just watching film. No one says a word. And he's like, what is the point? What is the point of all this? And I don't know. Help me make heads of tails of you're coming into an organization and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And you walk into something like that. How is he supposed to respond?
Yeah, I really don't know what the organization is doing, because the whole film session situation, it was only brought up because it was Jimmy Butler of all people that said something. But I'm sure that Brett Brown did not learn from Greg Popovich to run a film session with no words, no commentary, just watching TV, watching yourselves and just hoping, hey, they'll figure it out. No, lead the team. Tell somebody they got to do something better. Make the adjustments. Do something. You're less of a coach and more of a chaperone at this point. And that's what was really brought up as to the reason why Jimmy said he left, because he said that someone had told him that Brett Brown was asked, can you control Jimmy? And he was like, no, don't even worry about it. You're not about to control a grown man. And especially because you can't even run this team effectively. Why would I stay here for all the money in the world? I don't even know if I'm going to be back in the situation that we were in. There's no point for me to stay in Philadelphia.
Right. He was clearly put off by that comment, or how that comment got to him. You're going to try to control a grown man. And number two, in his mind, he didn't give them any reason to feel like they even needed to ask the question about control. So that's a troubling statement. That's a troubling situation whereby, they felt like Jimmy was the problem. And you brought him into your organization. And somehow they felt like Jimmy could be the problem. And maybe they didn't do enough of their homework. Maybe they were just going off of the reputation that they heard of from his days in Chicago and Minnesota and didn't really get to know him. And it kind of seems that way, that they didn't really get to know him that half year and didn't really get to invest a relationship in him. And we all know that these things always go back to one thing. It goes back to ownership, number one, the organization, number two, being the front office, and the coach. And I think, unfortunately, what is going to happen is, well, not unfortunately, but because I do want Brett Brown fired. I don't think he's the man for this particular job for a lot of reasons. X's and O's being one of them. Just the way he communicates. He's supposed to be a player's coach. He is supposed to be a guy who communicates very well. But in this situation, I don't think he's doing any of that right. I don't think he can handle the situation. I don't think he can handle the personalities. And I think, Jordan, he says things, but doesn't communicate things, at least with this team.
And it really just brings back so many memories of all the press conferences that he's had. And it feels like when you watch those again, it feels like it's the first time he's saying things like, hey, I want Ben to shoot a 3-pointer every game this year, at least one, and he doesn't shoot a 3-pointer since he says that. Like, clearly, he is not telling Ben Simmons to his face, shoot the ball, because it would have happened by now, or Brett would have benched him for not listening or something, just do anything. It's one thing to be a player's coach, but it sounds like Brett is a real pushover, and it also brings back another story from last year where Brett was angry in the playoffs and everybody was like, wow, I've never seen that before, and it's such a shocking thing, and it really energizes. Like, why is the one time that he screams such a big thing? Like, if he wants something done and they're not doing it, be a coach and lead them. It's not rocket science as to why this team consistently underperforms.
Well, I think you can see the writing on the wall when it comes to Brett Brown. Number one, he is still stubborn and insistent on trying to find out whether or not Joel Embiid and Al Horford can be compatible on the court at the same time. That answer clearly is no. And he's trying to use the excuse that, well, Ben is out. Let's see if Ben was the problem with those two playing together. And, I still want to try it. Which is not the right time, as this team is reeling right now with their home record their road record, and losing ground in the standings, if you will. But he still wants to experiment. And the second thing he wants to do is, and watch out for this. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think we're getting a look into Brett's mindset. Shake Milton has been playing outstanding basketball, and he's been the one lone bright spot this entire NBA season for the 76ers, which has been a really good thing. But he made a comment a few days ago that, expect Shake to have a much larger role in the offense, which is fine. I just caution everyone to kind of watch and see how that begins to take shape once Ben Simmons becomes more healthy. And we'll get to Ben later in terms of his prognosis with his back issue. But I just want to, I want to get your thoughts, Jordan, in terms of how you can see that unfolding, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I really love Shake Milton's game. I've been wanting him to get minutes ever since, even in the beginning of the year, he showed flashes, and then he had an injury and didn't get those minutes back because of the emergence of Furkan being their best shooter. He essentially took all their wing minutes. And then adding on Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson really cut into his minutes. But once Ben got hurt, then we really saw Shake grow in confidence in his role, and that 39-point explosion against the Clippers to keep them in a game they shouldn't have nowhere near been in was amazing. And I really think he can contribute solidly to this team. And I do think he should be the backup point guard going forward when Ben does come back. I don't think Alec Burks is the guy that you want bringing up the ball and being the one main ball handler there. He's a great secondary ball handler that can get some points, but he doesn't create that much for others. And Shake can do a little bit of both when it comes down to it. And in terms of the Al Horford starting situation, I don't know why you would do that, not only because the fit clearly doesn't work, but also because Mike Scott has actually shown some signs of life recently. Why would you cut his minutes as soon as he starts looking like the Mike Scott we saw last year? It doesn't make any sense what Brett does anymore, and it's hard to believe his credibility when you see the team failing like this. Especially that blown game against the Warriors. You're playing against Andrew Wiggins and a bunch of G Leaguers and rookies. How do you lose that game late? And it really doesn't help him when the story with Jimmy Butler comes out in terms of his case for keeping his job.
Well, I think it's clear, at least to me, this is just my opinion, and I'll bounce this off you as well. I think Brett Brown sees the writing on the wall, and I think he is going to go out on his own terms. And he's curious about the Horford and Embiid matchup or lineup combinations. And he just wants to see if it's going to work. He knows that Ben is going to be out. And this news just dropped again today. Ben is going to be out at least another 3 weeks. They say he's making progress. How much progress, I don't know. I mean, back injuries are very tough to, put a time frame on. And it seems like he has some sort of pinched nerve, basically, that you never know when it's going to go away. So he's going to be reevaluated in 3 weeks, which basically says to you and me and everyone who has any kind of common sense is that we're probably not going to see Ben until the playoffs or just before the playoffs. So Brett knows that he has all this time to work with, and he feels like, hey, if I'm going to go down, if this team is going to go down in flames, I'm at least going to do it my way. What are your thoughts?
I don't think he necessarily thinks that the pairing will work. Like you said, he's looking for a way to make it work, but I don't think he has that much faith in it. I personally think with the whole Al Horford starting, it's one of those organizational things. I think with Josh Harris having written a check to Al Horford for these big bucks, why is he not starting in a situation where Ben is not playing? I think there's a lot more behind the scenes influence to a lot of the lineup decisions that we have as of late. And it's really concerning because, like Jimmy said in the podcast with JJ, it was not only the sense of not knowing what you're doing, but they also said there were so many voices that seemed like they were trying to lead, but not fully lead at the same time. Like they were hearing multiple things from multiple different people. I suspect one thing from Brett, one thing from Elton, one thing from Harris on the vision of the team and how the team should go. And it's not very conducive to successful basketball as we've seen. And I think Al's starting is just recouping some lost money because they might as well get their worth out of him and make him start if they're paying him that much. So I just think it's more of just maximizing what has been put into this roster.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So that could be very well the situation. I mean, I still think it's more of a Brett Brown thing because Brett Brown has been so mercurial, but it does make complete sense that someone in the organization, maybe ownership, is saying, listen, we're paying this guy max money, at least for, what we brought him in for, at upwards of $100 million. And, he's coming off the bench. And from a basketball standpoint, that doesn't mean anything. From a strict basketball standpoint, Al Horford looks washed. He's missing layups. He plays well at times or in spurts. He's not playing any defense, at least in the interior, unless Embiid is on the court, to kind of like play secondary defense. But at the end of the day, I don't care who you put him on the court with. He's not playing well. He looks horrible. So it just kind of, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows, who's exactly pushing these buttons, but it's clearly just a complete sham to Sixers fans to have to watch this night in and night out. Now, in regards to that, the Sixers do have a favorable slate of games coming up where they can at least get back to the business of basketball. They play the Detroit Pistons tonight as we are taping this show. It's a home game, but in fact, the next 4 games are at home. They play Detroit, they play the Pacers, the Wizards, and the Raptors all at home. And you know how well they play at home, Jordan. So what are you expecting with all this chaos that is going on right now and all this talk and players in and out of the lineup? Josh Richardson may come back tonight. There's been some discussion that he's not ready in terms of what he said about his own health. There's a lot of discussion on Twitter about that. I expect them to win tonight against the Pistons, but the games against the Pacers, the Wizards, and the Raptors, even though they're at home, they're not going to be cakewalks.
Oh, no, not at all. I think the tone has to be set in tonight's game against Detroit because one thing I'm really watching out for is, in light of this whole Jimmy news, we get a guy that comes from the Miami Heat and sees what a well-run organization with a really good coach is like. And all year he's been calling this team soft and been complaining left and right, but he's consistently one of the only guys that tries the hardest. While the shots may always be falling with Josh Richardson, you can at least see he plays every minute with the utmost intensity. And having him back will be really impactful to this team. And I hope it will energize them to this win here tonight. That Pacers game is a desperately needed game if the Sixers do want that 4 seed, because the Pacers are right above right now at 5. So if any time's the time to beat them and really take the reins on this season and get to the highest seed possible, you have to win that game. The Wizards, I'm honestly expecting a classic Sixers letdown because Bradley Beal has been on fire as of late. And if he torches this team, I can definitely see that happening without any surprise at all, going for 50 or something, and causing the Sixers team to just get caught slipping essentially. And that Raptors game, I'm not expecting a win at all. They're the top 5 team in basketball right now, and they just have so much depth that the Sixers can't match due to all the injuries and everything going on.
Yeah, and after that game, it's a back-to-back. After the Raptors game, it's a back-to-back flight. They play the Charlotte Hornets on the road, and then they come back home to play the Atlanta Hawks, and we all know how they play against the Hawks, like crap. And then they're at Minnesota, and then they wrap it up finally at the Chicago Bulls, and that's the next 8 games that we're looking towards. So I think in terms of seeding, Jordan, I don't think this team cares anymore. I think they're either going to be the 5 or the 6 seed, and I think it doesn't matter to them at this point in time. They've had so many injuries, so much turnover. I don't think they have the mental capacity or the mental stamina to focus in and say, hey, we've got this great schedule, this favorable schedule coming up, and we're just going to take advantage of it and go on a big run. I just don't see that happening. I just see them getting to a spot where they say, hey, we're going to be the 6th seed. We're going to play the Celtics. We beat them 3 out of 4 times this past year, and I'm okay with that. And matchup-wise, they're going to be okay with that. So that's what I expect. I expect this team to finish at the 6th spot and to just roll the dice with the Celtics and go from there.
Honestly, I don't think there is too much of a difference in that in the seeds for them. Besides, if they do get the 4th seed, they have the home court advantage for the 1 series. But in terms of the matchup between the Heat and between the Celtics, I would take either one. I do like our season series against the Celtics, but the Heat, they've been unraveling ever since they've made their recent moves. They've looked good on offense, but their defense has been really, really terrible as of late. And if it comes to a playoff series where both offenses are struggling, I trust the Sixers defense more to create with Ben Simmons back, able to take Jimmy Butler out of the game. And in terms of a Celtics series, they have a lot of pieces that can just heat up at any given moment. What do the Sixers do if Marcus Smart is hot from 3 while they're focusing on Tatum and Kemba Walker? There's a lot of ways that they can hurt you that the Heat exactly can't. And I do like the season series and how it looked with the Celtics, but honestly, I would take either one.
I would too. I definitely agree with that. Again, to me, it really doesn't matter. If I had my druthers, I would want to play the Celtics first and get them, if you will, out of the way. I do think they have a favorable matchup against the Celtics than they do against the Miami Heat. So I would kind of disagree with you slightly on that in regards to, Bam Adebayo is a problem for the Sixers. And he's going to continue to be a problem for them. And especially if the Miami Heat continue to shoot or find their shooting touch again during the playoffs, it's just going to be a difficult series for them to win when they don't have the home court advantage. But I think there's familiarity with the Celtics. And I think there's confidence against the Celtics, especially with Embiid and eventually getting Simmons back, that they feel that they can handle them. I wouldn't worry about Marcus Smart getting hot for 7 games. If that's going to be the X factor for the Celtics, then they're in trouble. But we'll see how these things shake out. So speaking of things shaking out, Jordan, again, we looked at these next 8 games. I'm going to say the Sixers go 4-4 in these next 8 games. And at that point, they'll be, 42-30? Maybe clinch a playoff spot by then. I'm not sure of the math, but I just see this team treading water until we know that Embiid's going to come back. I don't think it'll be tonight. It'll probably be maybe that Pacers game that he's going to come back. And I think slowly but surely, maybe as this team gets back to the business of playing just basketball, that things will begin to settle down just a bit around that locker room.
I hope we see the same quote-unquote switch that was flipped around this time last year, because the Sixers really did have a good run going out of the season with all their new pieces. Right now, it's a very, very much different situation, but I do hope we see that more focused team going forward, where maybe Al turns a corner, and he's looked serviceable as of late in a starting role. and being the main center, but there are those times where he looks very washed and just can't seem to move as fast as everyone else and gets out muscled for other rebounds and blocks and everything. And it's just very frustrating to watch. But again, every year with the Celtics, Al Horford hasn't looked like a superstar, but come the playoff time, he looks very much better. So I hope we get that Al Horford.
Well, that's a lot of hope bound for the 76ers. And I just, yourself and myself included, I don't think we have enough faith that hope is going to be enough to turn this thing around. I know you just said that, we hope that the switch can be flipped again. I'm not sure if it was flipped last year because I thought they had enough talent to, just go all the way to the finals. And, we all know about what happened last year. I just don't see it this year. There's just too much stuff going on with this organization. The injuries included just makes it so difficult to overcome the hurdles that they have to overcome with so much competition in the NBA and the improvement of teams like the Miami Heat. I just have a problem seeing it happening. So, but no further ado, we'll just kind of leave it at there. Jordan, thank you so much for another episode of Triple Threat Podcast. We will next week dive into the NCAA tournament, where we're going to have our field of 68 filled out. We'll talk about the brackets. We'll talk about seeding. We'll talk about our Final Fours and our favorites to win the NCAA tournament next week.
Yeah, hopefully we see Carolina make a run this week in the ACC tournament. I'm watching intently. They could pull off history, but I mean, I wouldn't be disappointed if they didn't because I've seen this team all year. But this tournament, a lot of teams that can win it all, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the parity really takes shape in this tournament this year.
Absolutely. It should be insane. I mean, there are anywhere from 8 to 10 teams that could win it all. No one knows who's going to win it all because of the parity. And I think that this year has been upside down like no other. You look at Carolina and the season they've had. You look at who are going to be the 1 and 2 seeds. Not to say anything bad about what they've done all year long, but we're looking at teams like San Diego State and Baylor, and being 1 and 2 seeds, and blue bloods like Kentucky and Carolina and Duke having not necessarily bad years besides Carolina, but not necessarily having stellar years as well. They've been kind of like around that 6, 7, 8 kind of number ranking, and being a 2, 3, and 4 seed. So it's been a crazy year in college basketball. It's anyone's guess who could win it all. And that is what makes it interesting. That's why we love March Madness so much. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Triple Threat Podcast. Ken Triplett along with Jordan Triplett. We'll see you next week.